centuries ago, a French admirer of Sir Isaac Newton, when he saw one of his projects, he took a glass prism and he showed, taking a single ray of sunlight, that a single ray of sunlight contains every color in the prism. And he showed this. He showed a rainbow using a prism. This Frenchman was so taken aback, he said, it has been recorded for posterity, that what a difference there is between a truth that is glimpsed and a truth that is demonstrated. Okay, I cite this from the era of Sir Isaac Newton because I've made many claims in many videos. In my published books, my articles, I have said over and over and over that the Great Pyramid is a calendar of stone. I have also showed that I'm not the first one to have conceived this. But those who came before me were disproven because they used corrupt calendars. The difference that I bring to the table is that my 510-page thesis, Chronicon, puts all the calendars of the ancient world together in a synthetic timeline based on the Annus Mundi reckoning, which is used by the Masons today, or at least in Mason literature. Annus Mundi reckoning is absolutely unbroken. It's a single linear timeline. I believe that we are now living in the year 5915 Annus Mundi. And our calendar, Anno Domini, translates to the year 2021. Now, I'm way in the middle of, I'm on 945 East. A small Texas highway in the middle of nowhere. It's just pine country. A little annex between Leggett, Texas and Lake Livingston. It'll take me to the north side of Lake Livingston. I'll hit the bridge. But anyway, the Great Pyramid. I'm not going to waste time in my coming videos when I show you the calendrical significance of the Great Pyramid's layout. I'm not going to show you that. I'm not going to waste time with all these specifics about the Great Pyramid that I have already mentioned in all my videos. I have a whole series about the Great Pyramid. If you have not listened to it already, then you're probably not going to value these next 2 or 3 videos about the actual calendar of world history that is encoded within the rectilinear dimensions of the Great Pyramid, scientifically documented and measured by Sir Flinders Petrie. Although Sir Flinders Petrie had no idea that his measurements were going to be used to show that every single linear inch that he measured actually represented a year in world history. Many people have theorized this. No one's been able to show it. Their calendars have been corrupted. Their chronologies were incomplete. They didn't do it. Everyone before me has relied somewhat on Usher's chronology, which is absolute bullshit. I have put back the history of the world in Chronicon, and someone else has verified it independently named Stephen Jones. He is a biblical chronologist studying the Assyrian eponyms, the book of Jubilees, the book of Jasher, and the Old Testament. He put together an Old Testament timeline and dated every single event exactly as I did in Chronicon. Shocked me, blew my mind. But then again, he wasn't using biased materials or corrupted data taken from James Usher. He was doing original research, which is something that I value. So I'm not really surprised that 2 independent minds at 2 different times in history came across the exact same conclusions. So Stephen Jones' chronology is my chronology. It's the exact same one. There is no differences. We don't deviate on a single event in a single year. And that's because once you get the date for the Exodus right and the date for the Great Flood, every other event in biblical history can be dated perfectly. And because you can date perfectly all the biblical historical accounts, you can now compare it to secular history, and you can get the Egyptian king list, you can get the Aramaic text, you can get the Samaritan text. Everything falls into place. Oh, I'm taking a right here. I'm in a little small town in Texas called Moscow. Go figure. After World War II, I'm pretty sure some Russians founded this place. It's nice though. It's on high ground. You can see for miles. It's a hill north of, actually I'm kind of northeast of Lake Livingston right now. Smack dab middle of pine country. So anyway, very few people very few people have an appreciation for the size and the dimensions of the Great Pyramid, which is absolutely relevant to the study. If you stand in front of the Great Pyramid, you have to look left to right just to see the whole side. It's 756 feet wide on all four sides. The sloping angle to the apex, where there is no capstone, is 203 levels of rock called courses. And those courses, I'm pulling behind a tractor that's going very, very slow up a hill, and I can't pass him because he's going up a hill, and I can't see if anybody's about to come over that hill. I might get killed. So I got to go slow till he gets to the top of the hill and I can see. But that's Texas. That's the type of life we live out here. These farmers and their tractors are very well respected and protected, and I'm not gonna buck the system. I still can't see, but I'm fixing to go now. And I'm gone. Alrighty. So, the Great Pyramid is a Technolithic structure. This means its tolerances are so high they were machined. They weren't done by hand. They weren't done by the standard Egyptological BS description, copper saws and all that crap. Don't believe that. If you ever go to the Great Pyramid, you'll see. There's no way that men chiseled that stuff. 2.5 million blocks. The average core blocks that make up the 203 levels of masonry are 2.5 tons. Now, I deal in rock every day, and I'm going to tell you now that an 85-pound rock is absolutely heavy. I can't imagine how many men it would take to negotiate a 2.5-ton rock up to 70 courses up the Great Pyramid. I don't want to hear that crap about ramps and all the Egyptian BS that you see in the textbooks, because a ramp that went that high would be more material than the Great Pyramid itself. It's ridiculous. It didn't happen. It didn't happen that way. Machines built that Great Pyramid, and this has been shown in my prior videos, and I'm not gonna go back to that either. But the Great Pyramid of Giza has a very unusual subterranean chamber. That's all they call it, the subterranean chamber. But it has a well pit of uncertain depth. It's full of water. They say that water comes from the Egyptian Nile. I don't care. It doesn't even matter to me. But I see a machine function. I see a monument made of solid stone, limestone, encased in granite on the inside, not the outside. The granite is on the passages on the inside, and the facing of the chambers on the inside, and the floor on the inside, and the shafts and relieving chambers on the inside. The granite is not on the outside of the Great Pyramid. That was limestone. So we have this subterranean chamber that was some type of, it filled up with water, and it was at different levels at different times according to pressure. Intense pressure has been evidenced in the stone of the Great Pyramid. We don't know why. A mechanism went up and down the Grand Gallery, probably at high velocity. It was probably a metal contraption, wheels with spokes, because the Grand Gallery has the indentations, the little alcoves where those spokes went. You can't miss it. Nobody can look at the Grand Gallery and think for a second that machines did not go up and down on tracks inside this room. This room is huge. It's 1,836 inches long. So many mysteries about the Great Pyramid. It's not even meant for us to decipher or even determine right now. But one thing we know is that it is arranged architecturally as a three-dimensional holographic template of the future in inches. Every inch is a year of world history. And this has been shown many times by many researchers who all cite all the geodetics and all the solar data showing that it's all commiserate, and I'm not going to get into that here either. I really don't even care. What I'm going to do in the next video is I am going to show you that the Great Pyramid of Egypt in inches shows precisely, exactly from year to year, the whole chronology that I have provided you in Chronicon. And if you don't think that is unique, then you need to read Chronicon, because Chronicon cites its sources, and you will find real quick that I did not date these events. The events that are depicted in Chronicon, I cite my source materials, and I show you where these dates come from. The descent of the Watchers, the pole shift in 3895 BC. The descent of the Watchers at Mount Ardus when the Anunnaki first appeared in the ancient East among the Ubaid civilization, the pre-Sumerian people, in the year 3439. The beginning of the Mayan long count calendar in 3113 BC. The beginning of the Sumerian king list in 2856 BC. The building of the Great Pyramid itself, its construction begin date in 2905 BC. Its end when it was finished in 2815 BC. The birth of Noah in 2856 BC. The Great Flood in 2239 BC. The Tower of Babel incident where the languages were confused, where the coding of our linguistics was altered so we could communicate to each other, couldn't build another pyramid again, and threaten the establishment, the overseers, the custodians, whatever you want to call them, Anunnaki. They did that in 1899 BC. And then the great nuclear holocaust that totally eradicated the Near East and India and the Aryan civilizations that were very well established. It ended them in a catastrophe that was so devastating in 1849 BC that we remember in the Bible as the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, but it was far more prolific than that. Now, these dates, the founding of Rome in 753 BC, the beginning of the Greek Olympiad calendar that started their history in 776 BC. The Phoenix destruction of the entire world in 1687 BC in the month of May, followed by the Phoenix visitation in 1135 BC. Phoenix again came in 583 BC. Over and over and over, I have given you the dates in many videos in my published books, on my articles in Archaix on Facebook. I have provided you dates. I have never deviated. I have never changed a single date. Chronicon was written over 12 years ago. I don't need to change the date because I know I got it right. I know I got it right because I cite all my source materials. And now I am going to show you in the Great Pyramid that whoever built the pyramid had mapped the future, because there's absolutely no way that what I'm going to show you could be real, that these architectural features of the Great Pyramid were done way before these events ever occurred, and yet they're there. They're easily seen for anybody to measure, for anybody. I mean, I'm not going by Adam Rutherford's measurements. I'm not going by H. Aldersmith. I am not going by Palmer Smith. I'm not going by Smith, Piazzi Smith. I'm definitely not going by Robert Menzies or John Taylor's measurements. I am only going by two predicates. One of them is Chronicon, which is the most accurate chronology of the history of the world. I put it together. It's over 10,000 source materials. It's awesome. It is awesome. Even the notes are awesome that I haven't even included yet. And the second thing I'm going by are the scientifically verifiable measurements of Sir Flinders Petrie that were done to the thousandth of an inch that are accepted by Egyptologists today. That's all I'm going by. And I'm going to show you a series of charts. I'm going to release a series of videos, and I'm going to show you that the history of the world was recorded in the Great Pyramid. I'm probably going to be the very first person on this rock that is able to demonstrate this, because everybody who has tried before failed, and they failed not only because they had inaccurate measurements. They all did it before Sir Flinders Petrie, but they failed principally because they had inaccurate chronologies. And I know that the reason that I went to prison at 17 years old was to put together this chronology. If someone comes behind me and puts all the pieces together that I have assembled, I'm cool. I'll die satisfied. And when I pass over to the other side, I will say that I have lived a good life because I passed the torch to somebody who could do something with it. But apparently I really can't. All I can do is release YouTube videos and educate just a few hundred people that actually watch my videos. I'm probably Several people have brought it to my attention that YouTube is shadow banning people. I believe it's probably happening to me because I get absolutely no, YouTube does not promote any of my material, any of my research. If you're a gay guy who likes to talk to his dog and walk through the park, you'll get 2 million subscribers and a monthly income of 10 to 12,000 a month if people donate to your channel. That's the type of world we live in. But if you want to follow the Archaix research and you want to know the truth about our world, you're just going to have to be a part of a channel like mine that only has a very few subscribers, because there's going to come a day when they kill me. I know my future. I'm not even worried about it. But there's going to come a day where I'm not going to be here anymore. They're not going to allow me to continue releasing this information. You need to copy my videos and do whatever you can to preserve this data. Because there's going to come a time where it's not going to be available to you anymore. All you're going to be able to do is tell people, hey man, I used to listen to this guy who's on YouTube. He told us all these things were happening, man. All these things, everything we're going through right now, man, it was on his YouTube channel. He told us it's going through. So just remember where you heard it. And those of you who have the technological capacity, record these videos. Record them off of YouTube. I do. I have flash drives for every one of my videos. I don't know where they'll end up, but I have them. I pass them to a friend. But anyway, not to be overly dramatic, I'm just letting you know. Yeah, we're not wasting any time on the specifics and the minutia about the Great Pyramid. I have a whole series of videos about that. You can go research that yourself. What I'm going to do in these next videos, I'm going straight to the point. I'm going to show you the architectural measurements inside the Great Pyramid, and I'm going to show you exactly, instantly, how they translate to the calendars of the ancient world all the way up to today and to the very near future. Because I'm not wrong, people. You're not going to believe what I show you. This is JasonArchaix.com. Welcome to part 3 of the Archaix prophecy, the Giza simulation code. In this presentation, you will see never before published material in video form. Not even my published books convey this material. The Great Pyramid was built by a civilization 4,800 years ago that was far more technologically advanced than we have been led to believe. In fact, my first book published on the topic was The Lost Scriptures of Giza, where I provide hundreds of bibliographic notations and citing sources as old as 25 centuries ago on the Great Pyramid that had not yet appeared in other books. I had put together a chronology of world history that had hitherto yet not been accepted by many other researchers and writers, although many that I'm collaborating with at the present are beginning to at least listen to the material. My research serves to shatter many paradigms, and it is most unfortunate that in the background that I come from, a Christian for the first 40 years of my life, believing in the unadulterated, unaltered Word of God, the King James Version of the Bible, I had to divorce myself from these preconceived belief systems because they had led me down many false trails. The pre-flood world was not a primitive environment. The old Bronze Age was a Technolithic age. Hyperbolic curves, machine boring, geopolymers. The evidence is everywhere. It's been staring us in the face. Researchers like Christopher Dunn have released amazing books about the Giza complex and Great Pyramid, showing that only machines that are far more sophisticated than we have today could have produced the materials that we see in the ancient world. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the blocks of this monument in Egypt are made of geopolymers, made through a process in which artificial stone is created that is virtually indistinguishable from natural rock. The limestone casing blocks of the Giza structure contain opal, CT hydroxyapatite, a silico-aluminate not found in the quarries, blocks containing numerous trapped air bubbles. Organic fibers have accidentally fallen into the mixture, and they had been found inside the stone blocks of the Great Pyramid. But you're not going to read this in the official establishment literature of the time. You're not going to find Zawi Hawass admitting this to anyone. The greatest evidence of the geopolymer construction of the Great Pyramid is the magnetite. When liquid rock cools, all the magnetite has time to point toward magnetic north, but not the geopolymers of the Great Pyramid and other ancient structures from the Old Bronze Age. They used a process of liquefying limestone, adding in composites that would harden it, and then they would cool it artificially fast, too fast for the magnetite crystals to align toward magnetic north. This is what we find. The magnetite is all in disarray.
Sir Flinders Petrie, 100 years ago, found abundant evidence of a drilling and boring technology employed in the structure that was beyond his ability to understand, but he documented it nonetheless. But a century later, Christopher Dunn recognized that these builders use ultrasonic drilling with diamond-tipped bits. Petrie's measurements are published in his book, The Pyramids and Temples of Giza. His measurements are accepted by Egyptologists and especially by Zawi Hawass, the head of Egypt's Antiquities Department. Hawass calls Petrie the father of Egyptology. To fully appreciate the magnitude of my discovery of the Phoenix holography encoded in the Great Pyramid, a little history leading up to Petrie's analysis of Giza is in order. I stress these facts about Zawi Hawass and Sir Flinders Petrie because it is only the arithmetic, mathematics, and measurement dimensions of Sir Flinders Petrie that I employ. In 1646, the monumental research of John Greaves was published titled Pyramidography, or A Description of the Pyramids of Egypt, in England. He was then made the professor of astronomy at Oxford. This was the scientific world's first true examination of the Egyptian relics and Great Pyramids. Over 2 centuries later, in 1859, John Taylor completed his own work, The Great Pyramid. Why was it built and who built it? The book was published and became a sensation in the year 1860. The first book to theorize that the Great Pyramid was of biblical import, that it was a prophetic calendar erected by the biblical patriarchs. Unfortunately, his work was scoffed at by the Royal Society. Because the structure was located near ancient Egypt, they assumed it must be Egyptian. Taylor was the editor of the London Observer. Inspired by John Taylor's work on the Great Pyramid Mysteries, Astronomer Royal for Scotland, Charles Piazzi Smith, traveled with his wife at his own expense to Egypt, where he took careful measurements of the Great Pyramid in late 1864 and 1865 during the American Civil War. During his study of the structure, Smith became convinced of the Great Pyramid's biblical import. His findings were published in 1880 in his huge book, Our Inheritance in the Great Pyramid. At this time, Robert Menzies developed the theory that the pyramid inch and its length represented a single year in world history. Every measurement of the monument made was in pyramid inches, which is very interesting because the unit that he found is exactly one fractal of the 365.25 days it takes the Earth to go around the sun. It's the research of Robert Menzies was absolutely fascinating for the time. Smith quickly adopted the view of Menzies, even producing evidence to support it. However, Taylor, Smith, Menzies, and those thereafter, like Davidson, all employed inaccurate chronologies of the world, or inaccurate measurements of the Giza structure, which caused the pyramid inch theory to fall into academic disfavor. They made obvious mistakes and I've even made the same mistake of applying current events and misdating prophetic material, and they did it to the extent while using the physical measurements of the Great Pyramid that it was really easy to disprove them. David Davidson was an English engineer who sought to prove Robert Menzies wrong, that the Great Pyramid was not a prophetic calendar of historical timeline in stone. He extensively studied and measured the monument and completely changed his mind. His own mammoth book, The Great Pyramid, Its Divine Message, with Egerton Sykes, ended up supporting Menzies, Smith, and Taylor, but added a wealth of new supporting evidence. By 1926, his book was famous. Adam Rutherford came next, releasing his 4-volume work, Pyramidology, in 1957, that also added much more evidence of the pyramid calendar theory. All these men were correct in their theory, but corrupt in their calculations. The most precise measurements ever made and scientifically accepted by academia and by Egyptologists alike are those of the meticulous analysis of Sir Flinders Petrie, whose own instruments made measurements to 1,000th of an inch. And it is only these measurements that exhibit proof of the Great Pyramid's rectilinear calendar of world history and the future. For those who are interested in Adam Rutherford's research, AIP, the American Institute on Pyramid Research, exists today. They have a website. They have a YouTube channel. AIP YouTube videos are pretty fascinating. Larry Paul is the director today of that organization. He's a man that I personally correspond with from time to time. A very interesting guy. He's traveled to Egypt. He knows Zawi Hawass personally. Those are some videos you might want to get into. The criticism these pioneers of pyramidology received had pretty much guaranteed that today's generation of popular pyramid researchers totally avoid the whole pyramid inch concept. Instead, they advanced the most ridiculous and insupportable theories and the publishing houses mass-produced this idiocy. But what you are about to see in this video is in no modern books or older books. Only Petrie's measurements are employed. That's not to say some authors have not come close. The following two writers have impressed me with their vision, and I assure you, compliments from me are very uneasily obtained. Though it is obvious, they grasp at a shadow only from its periphery. Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval, two authors that I have a lot of problems with. But putting that aside, they had a stroke of genius, and this is what they wrote. In the Message of the Sphinx in Appendix 3, they come very close to understanding the purpose of the Great Pyramid's holospheric function, not its engineering purpose, don't get them confused. They wrote that the function of the Giza blueprint is to provide a virtually indestructible holographic apparatus. Living man is the result of the holographic union between matter and spirit. It would very much appear that the followers of Horus, Shimshu-Hor, understood the cosmic mechanism to somehow re-separate the two, the construction of the amazing holographic starstone apparatus of Giza. The Giza interior is definitely a blueprint. Now this is me now. We're done with Bauval and Hancock. The Giza interior is definitely a blueprint. That it is linked to an interface with the holosphere we are immersed inside is very true. That it serves as a cosmic mechanism is also correct, but Hancock and Bauval do not even know anything about the Phoenix chronology. None of their multitudes of published books even hint that they are aware that our world is on a fixed 138-year timeline going back to before the flood, and that many biblical events fall perfectly in sync with this 138-year timeline. Or that the 138 is the internal measurement of the Great Pyramid, the blueprint that is scientifically accepted today. The following data is unknown to them, which only makes me appreciate their observations even more. The earliest traditions of the Great Pyramid of Giza are not Egyptian and assert that it was designed to endure through a cataclysm. That it provided a basis of knowledge for future generation was its purpose. Internal measurements scientifically conducted by Sir Flinders Petrie of the rectilinear subterranean passage widths, chamber heights, passage length, and ascendant passages easily provides a uniform unit of measurement that was used by the constructors throughout the monument. These measurements were discovered over a century ago and were conducted to disprove the wildly popular pyramid inch theories of the time. These measurements are scientifically acceptable today, absolutely precise, and they are arranged in rectilinear lengths of 138, 552, 1518, 1656, 2070, 3036, 4140, and 5796. Every single number divisible by 138, the orbital period of the Phoenix object. Petrie knew nothing of the Phoenix. These numbers as orbital links are proven in my books, When the Sun Darkens, and in Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse. 4 meticulously illustrated charts of the interior of the Great Pyramid exhibit precisely multitudes of measurements, all divisible by 138. All 4 found right here in this video presentation. We must conclude that the builders of the Great Pyramid of Giza were aware of the Phoenix object, and this awareness allowed them to know when it would return over and over again. We also conclude that the world of the Sethites, of Enoch, and later Abraham was not the primitive society that we have been led to believe. The Great Flood of 2239 BC did not catch them unaware. They prepared for it. These measurements prove the Phoenix object will return to visit great destruction on our modern world in May 2040. The 6th seal of the apocalypse of the biblical narrative in the book of Revelation, which was borrowed from the older Greek Sibylline oracles, is the subject matter. It is the end game for whatever this Phoenix repetitive destruction is. Edgar Casey, known popularly as the Sleeping Prophet, is accused by many of being a medium of witchcraft, God-touched, demon-possessed, a formerly illiterate simpleton whose mind is in touch with transdimensional beings that divulge to him secrets. Whatever the case may be, he has been right many times in the diagnosis of ailments of his neighbors and scientifically documented case studies where Edgar Casey nailed exactly what somebody was suffering, and he did it through dreaming. Now, what Edgar Casey says about the Great Pyramid, which is a subject matter he should know absolutely nothing about, is amazing. He said the Great Pyramid is a record in stone of the history and development of man to the end of the present Earth cycle. Its records are written in the language of mathematics, geometry, and astronomy, as well as in the kinds of stone that are used. After the end of this cycle, there is to be yet another change in the Earth's position. That is amazing. I have already shown in 2 books and in 2 prior videos that the Phoenix episode of 2040 in the month of May will result in a pole shift, a change in the Earth's position. He further says that it signifies the return of the great initiate for the culmination of the prophecies. All changes that have come and are to come are shown there in the passages of the Great Pyramid from the base to the top. Changes are signified by the layer of stone. Again, this is fascinating. In my own book, When the Sun Darkens, and in Chronicon, I show that the terminal date for the basement of the Great Pyramid ends in 1902, and this is by many different mathematical computations. What's fascinating is that 1902 to the year 2106, which is the 6,000th year from the beginning of the pole shift of 3895 BC, which was started by Phoenix, is exactly 6,000 years. But from 1902 to 2106 is 204 years, which, if Edgar Casey is correct, 203 levels of the Great Pyramid plus the chief cornerstone is 204. Put another way, 1902 was the beginning of the Giza course countdown to the arrival and finishing of the monument. The Giza course countdown is 203 years. 1902 is 203 years to 2105, which was the end year to Nostradamus. He didn't take in consideration there was one more year needed to finish the monument. The pyramid today has no capstone. The chief cornerstone was a very ancient belief that God was coming to earth only once the monument of man was completed. We are a long way off from understanding the function of the Great Pyramid, engineering beyond our present comprehension. Continued discoveries made public bear this out. In 1993, Rudolf Gattenbrink sent up a specially invented robot up one of the mysterious shafts extending up through the courses of masonry from the Queen's Chamber, where the robot discovered a photographed a mysterious and virtually inaccessible tiny door with a copper handle. This sensational find dispels the view that the shafts were intended for viewing the stars or were air shafts. The door is closed and the shafts will require tiny mirrors, which they do not have, and they would have to open straight out or extend to the exterior faces of the monument. The Gantenbrink discovery contributes to the fact that the Great Pyramid, the only structure with these unique shafts, had a specific technolithic function, an engineering purpose. There is no telling how many discoveries like this have not been made public. Most of the public are absolutely unaware of the compression evidence that is found only in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. An explosive force has blown the stone out 1/8 of an inch in all directions. An immense amount of pressure, and it was very, very fast, like a blast. These are the measurements of Sir Flinders Petrie. Everything circled in red. Those are Phoenix numbers, all divisible by 138. There are major features within the pyramid: descending passage, subterranean chamber, the vertical distances between the basement rock and subterranean chamber width of the roof, length of the tunnel attached to it. It's absolutely amazing. The 1656 year history of the flood is represented in there in a vertical measurement. 1380, 552, everything's divisible by 138. It is a principal message of the pyramid. The great cataclysm reset that ended Eden was 3895 BC. That was not a beginning of Earth. It was a beginning of our present current paradigm, our new timeline this chief cornerstone timeline that we're on right now started in 3895 BC, which is the exact linear distance of the entire surface of the floor of the king's chamber to the great step, and the great step all the way down to the descending passage. It is exactly 3895. It was measured by Petrie as so. These are amazing revelations that the architecture is absolutely so precise. These are not the measurements of Menzies and Taylor and Smith and Davidson or even Rutherford. These are the measurements that are accepted by the scientific authorities. These are the only measurements that I can go on in the propagation of my theory that history is divided into 138-year segments, leading to a reset in 2040. Now, every boxed measurement is divisible by 138. All these measurements, these are verticals. These are sloping distances. Sloping distances are not the same as straight distances. They have to be scientifically measured, but every single boxed number you see on this chart is divisible not only by 138, but was measured by Sir Flinders Petrie and is exact to the thousandth of an inch. Again, it's absolutely amazing. Golden proportion is 144, yet the 144th level of blocks was exactly 4140 pyramid inches, which is again divisible by 138. The Technolithic device is an ancient gigantic machine, a projector that required a massive power source that activated it from 3 to 7 seconds, needed to upload this 138-year cataclysm protocol into our holospheric coding. This was done by an enemy of humanity. The chief cornerstone who will descend is the defeater of this enemy. 41-story stone structure of laser precision tolerances scientifically measured to contain a coding based of rectilinear distances of units all divisible by 138. A holospheric template of the future built over 48 centuries ago. The Great Pyramid of Giza is a crystalline geopolymer resonance generator carrying out a 138-year cataclysm protocol. You have to remember this. We have 20 more years from the release of this video to replace the missing components in the antechamber, probably hidden inside the Great Pyramid itself, and create a power source, design an interference pattern, and activate the structure to stop the return of the Phoenix weapon in May 2040. But then again, it might not even be possible. In the historical record, the Sumerian references to the Tablet of Destinies, the Me devices, and the story of Zu are the best leads to discovering what we need to know about this monument and how to activate it, if it can be activated at all. The rectilinear geometry of the Great Pyramid's interior dimensions divided into units of 138 within a structure with known proportions demonstrating 365.225 pi and phi shows a linear timeline of reappearances of something every 138 years. This is the Phoenix chronology. And one of these giant pyramids contains within its rectilinear measurements the golden proportion, phi and pi, 3.1416 curvature equations, palindromes, the 365.25 solar year, lunar tolerances, laser precision measurements, unique upper chambers no other pyramids in the world contain. The other one is a decoy. This is Archaix.com. This discovery of the 138 in the pyramid is way after, years after my first book, When the Sun Darkens, on this topic. I had no idea what kind of research I was getting into when I was studying over 40 different versions of the Great Flood and where it was going to take me, and how this ancient Jewish legend of the angel of death who appears every 138 years and destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, this 138 years I found in the Egyptian text, this 1,656 month timeline the Egyptians venerated, connecting it to a world cataclysm. Then I find that 138 years is exactly 1,656 months, and 1,656 years was how long the pre-flood world lasted, from the Genesis story to the Great Flood itself. This is Archaix.com. Pay attention, we got more videos coming on this vein. I conclude that the search for synchronicity, it just will never end. We exist submerged in a flowing hologram governed by initiatives and protocols that serve to keep us ignorant, enslaved, and depopulated. Our existence is the desert and all perceptions are mirage. The coding of apocalypse was preserved in stone inside the dimensions of the Great Pyramid. All of the Phoenix data is found therein. We are pawns in someone else's game, made to believe in fictions that keep our minds away from the facts. This is Jason of Archaix.com. This is our third video, as promised, on the year 1902, but it's really not about 1902. It's about what this Phoenix history, this Phoenix phenomenon means for you, what it means for our world, and how 1902 was the year one of an entirely different calendar that was actually set in motion over 4,800 years ago. Fascinating topic. It's going to be a short presentation. We're going to get right to the point. Brahma and Saraswati, known in Genesis as Abram and Sarai, Abram was born in 1947-48 Annus Mundi, which was the old Hebrew reckoning year. It was the year of the rabbis. Now, this translates in our Anno Domini calendar as 1947-48 BC. Very unusual. Again, this is simulation theory evidence that a calendar that was started in retrospect would line up so perfectly, especially considering the fact that this was the exact epicenter between the beginning of the Anno Domini calendar and the beginning of the Annus Mundi original Hebrew calendar before rabbinical corruption. What this means is that Abraham was actually born at the intersect of two timekeeping systems, one going backward and one going forward. Very unusual. Therefore, Abraham and his message are palindromic. It's like a giant world history isometric projection, which leads us to year one being 3895 BC. And the end of that simulation being 1 AD, the beginning of the Anno Domini calendar. Now, 3895 BC has been shown by multiple different calendrical patterns, ancient calendars, the conclusions of Emanuel Velikovsky and some of his dating. If his dating is correct, then year one would definitely be 3895 BC. Stephen Jones, in his Secrets of Time, independently dated that using the Assyrian eponyms and his own decoding of all the chronomarkers in the book of Jasher. There's just so many different ways to determine it. All these charts that you're seeing right now show that all these ancient calendrical systems basically use 3895 BC as year one. Now, the disservice that has been given to us from the rabbis of old and carried on into the future by Christians misunderstanding the text that they were studying is that year one was not the creation event. The world is not 6,000 years old. 3895 BC was year one of the ancient world because the Phoenix weapon had been activated and a 930-year-old civilization came to an end. It was a 30-degree displacement of the lithosphere that destroyed everything. Oceans slipped over their basins, continents were submerged, everything was destroyed in such totality that it began every single ancient calendrical system. It was a new heavens and new earth because now different star patterns were seen in different locations of the sky because of the 30-degree displacement of the entire surface of the world. We have shown in our many videos that the Phoenix is named. It was a testimony against the Archons, those that believe they rule the world, that it is the mechanism of apocalypse and it is responsible for so many of the resets and cataclysms throughout world history. These have been definitively documented in our 14 or 15 videos that are primarily about just the Phoenix phenomenon. If you want to know the history, check it out. We're not going to get into that in this video. The subject matter of all these videos serves to show that these timelines go all the way up to the year 1902 and for a very profound reason. Not just what occurred in 1902, but calendarically in the holosphere, what 1902 represents. We are also reminded that in the ancient world, the person of Enoch / Enki was deeply associated with the architecture of the Great Pyramid of Egypt. The entire ascendant passage, gallery, and king's chamber distance is precisely 3895 inches, where it ends at the descending passage conjunct. The BC timeline collapsing into the Common Era, or the Anno Domini timeline, at the exact chronometrical location that forms the year 5796, or in our calendar, 1902. We find here an internal chronometrical timeline indicating the year 5796, when the architecture now shifts its focus from the internal to the external. 1902 AD thus becomes year one of an entirely new calendar, and the exterior of the monument now provides the chronometry revealing the end of the Great Pyramid calendar. And the architecture of the Great Pyramid has always been self-referencing over and over again. It provides many ways to measure the exact same thing. This is absolutely phenomenal monument, a piece of architecture that we're incapable of replicating what was done. This holographic timepiece in stone, and all the measurements are absolutely scientific by Sir Flinders Petrie, accepted today. A true mine of enigmas. In the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, we read this passage. He wrote all these signs of the creation which the Lord created, and wrote 366 books, and handed them over to his sons, and remained on earth 30 days, and was again taken up into heaven on the 6th day of the month Siphon, on the very day and hour when he was born. In verse 6, we read that Methuselah and his brethren, all the sons of Enoch, made haste and erected an altar at the place called Achaix, where Enoch had been taken up into heaven. In my very first published book, The Lost Scriptures of Giza, is definitively shown that the place called Achaix was later known as Giza, that it was regarded as an altar of God in the land of Egypt. And now look at this chart. Again, we find right here a biblical verse in the book of Isaiah that says the exact same thing. In that day there shall be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border. Border means Giza. Giza means border. Thereof to the Lord. And it shall be for a sign and for a witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. This is the altar of Adam. This is also the pillar of Enoch. They are one in the same. And the geometrical value for this passage is 5448, which just happens to be exactly the height of the Great Pyramid today, minus the chief cornerstone, 5,448 inches. The reason this is relevant is because the intended geometrical height of the Great Pyramid, if it had its capstone, would be 5,814 inches, which is 366 inches higher than it is today. Why is this relevant? Because Enoch was said to have written 366 books, but this is a code. We're talking about the chief cornerstone arriving to sit upon the monument of man. A book is merely a container of knowledge. There are 366 units here that identify this chief cornerstone. But the book is not an actual book. It's what the chief cornerstone represents. In the beginning, there were two trees. Two great pyramids mirrored these trees. One was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. One was the tree of life. The tree of life seems to have prevailed. This is 366. This is the book of life we are seeing in code here, and we can prove it even further using the calendar. The sloping angles of the four sides of the Great Pyramid are 51.51 degrees. Added together, these four slopes create the number 204. The apocryphal books of 1st and 2nd Ezra were removed from the canon of Scripture because they contain more information than the clergy or the Roman papacy wanted the people to know. Ezra is the reason why we know that the biblical books of Ezra and Nehemiah were forgeries, because it's admitted so in these apocryphal texts. And it's also Ezra that continues this code about the books. In 2nd Ezra 14:44, we read, in 40 days they wrote 204 books. The they are the angels that appeared to Esdras and conveyed to him the histories of the world in the past and in the future. These 204 books, again, books are merely containers of knowledge. And how the number 204 relates to the Great Pyramid has been seen, but now we're going to show it to you in the calendar.
In this picture, you're looking at the book of life. Each stone is a soul of man. This book of life is sitting upon a foundation which provides year one to the return of the chief cornerstone, the apex that will sit upon the monument of man. And in this book of life of stones, you're looking at the gate of God. This is the Phoenix Gate. This is the principal message of the Great Pyramid. And now to the final years of the Giza course countdown. The writings of Enoch convey very specifically that his messages and his work was for a far future generation. It was for a generation in the last days. Therefore, we can now interpret with this entire phenomenon of the Great Pyramid and the Phoenix linked together what it means for us today. Both the Phoenix history that is well documented and the chronometry of the Great Pyramid, which is well established in the linear measurements and rectilinear measurements of Sir Flinders Petrie, which are scientifically accepted today, we find that the year 1902 is the principal message of the Great Pyramid's last days calendar, the Giza course countdown. Every single course of blocks in the Great Pyramid represents a single year in the last days. 1902 is the foundation. There are 203 levels of blocks on the Great Pyramid that start from the ground and ascend all the way up to an empty platform, which is the 204th block. The 204th level, 203 years on top of 1902, this countdown of 203 years leads to the year 2105 AD, which was the year as a great consummation according to the prophet Nostradamus, as seen in our prior videos. This is not my conclusion at all, but taken from a published book from a Nostradamus author. Now, this is the year from 3895 BC, the Annus Mundi system, original Hebraic. This is the year 5999, which is not only my conclusion from the Phoenix dates, but also Stephen Jones, who put together an entire world chronology from sources I didn't even have access to at the time. We are looking at the book of life, counting down the years until it will receive its maker, the chief cornerstone, the stone the builders rejected. This monument once covered in 144,000 white limestone casing blocks that were later removed after earthquakes. This great, fantastic monument that is so misunderstood by humanity. This is the last day's countdown. This countdown began in 1902, and it shows Armageddon in the year 2106 AD. This calendar was built in the beginning, but its purpose was for the end. It's been with us all of this time, but it was never meant to be understood until the last days. The prophet Enoch, many of his writings are totally misunderstood because they have no context for any time prior to now. It's for the last days. This year, 2021 Common Era, or AD Anno Domini, is the year 119 of the Giza course countdown. By the year 1902, for 250 years, an idea was forming in not only the minds of Europeans and Americans, but everywhere that this idea had taken root, it lit the imagination of humans. Conversations, dinner parties, clubs, groups, study groups. In the year 1646, someone published material that lit a fire in the imagination of all those who heard it. That the Great Pyramid of Egypt might be more than just a stone monument. And for 250 years, this idea so offended the scientific community that they finally sent a giant of Scientifica to Egypt to study the monument. And temporarily, they succeeded in completely normalizing it. But what this man did completely proved that the Great Pyramid of Egypt was not built by Egyptians, and that it contains the most mathematically precise and sophisticated, almost futuristic concepts. Absolutely unbelievable what this man, his name is Sir Flinders Petrie, and what he found is astonishing.
In 1637 and 1638, a professor of astronomy at Oxford named John Greaves visited the Great Pyramid in Egypt. He made a serious study of the interior and exterior of the structure. The first minute examination of the monument by a notable scientist. Greaves became convinced that the structure encoded some ancient universal measuring system and its dimensions may have been far beyond the capacity of mankind to have designed. His epic research was published in 1646 as Pyramidographia, or a description of the Pyramid of Egypt, in England 375 years ago, or 130 years before the 1776 Declaration of Independence. It was actually this work that earned him his Oxford position. One of Greaves' closest colleagues was the famous Sir Isaac Newton, famous for his theory on the mechanics of gravity, a force of nature still unexplained today. Now, Newton was an intense researcher into the deeper mysteries of the scriptures and was convinced of latent messages encoded not only within the biblical records, but also within the Great Pyramid itself. He diligently studied the prophecies of the Bible and wrote over 1 million words of commentaries and thoughts. Sir Isaac Newton was convinced that the Great Pyramid contained a secret important to mankind. And one of his theories concerned the relationship between John Greaves' research on the Great Pyramid and his own belief that the Great Pyramid's dimensions contain the secrets of the universe. In demonstrating his own theory on gravity, Newton used the findings of Greaves on the Great Pyramid. You won't hear that from scientists today. Now, the deaths of both Archbishop James Usher and Professor John Greaves seem to exhibit the importance of their lives. Greaves died in 1652, the exact year that ended the 12th Bacton of the Mayan long count calendar that began in 3113 BC. Usher died in 1656 AD, the same year Edmund Halley was born, discoverer of Halley's Comet. This Anno Domini year of 1656 parallels the year 1656 Annus Mundi, the original Hebraic, for the Great Flood event, which happened in 2239 BC of our calendar. A disaster that Usher was fascinated with and even dated to the year 1656 Annus Mundi. A devout Christian and London publisher named John Taylor collected data from various sources on his own belief that the Great Pyramid Complex was built before the flood by biblical patriarchs of Genesis. He religiously studied the writings of former pyramidologists, especially the scholarly work of John Greaves. Taylor compiled evidence that the structure contained mathematical, geometrical, and astronomical mysteries and codes that translated into epochs of time. His most stringent belief was that the monument was erected in response to divine instructions given to pre-flood architects. In 1859, Taylor published his book, The Great Pyramid, Why Was It Built and Who Built It? 1859 is the date on the title page, but it was not until 1860 that the book was actually released. His book was received with awe by the public, but the Royal Society scoffed at the idea, shunning to think that this edifice in a desert in Egypt was in fact an historical and prophetic calendar in stone. But Taylor's idea was not entirely original. The Arabic writer Tohat al-Ghaib wrote that the Great Pyramid contained plans for the stars and historical and prophetic records. Muhammad bin Arabi also wrote about the structure, declaring that it was used in the computations of time. Unfortunately for Taylor, theories always precede application, and ideas are conceptualized within the minds of men who often die before others can demonstrate their mathematical fact. While the intellectual elites ridiculed Taylor and his work, his discoveries served to awaken a giant in the world of science. This was the astronomer royal for Scotland named Charles Piazzi Smith, a Christian who believed that Taylor's theories merited further research. He was a reputable scholar who had held the position of astronomer royal since 1845. Smith wrote John Taylor, and the two began a fascinating dialogue and became close friends. Taylor was very old, and he heartily believed that God had visited mercy on him in the form of Piazzi Smith, who would take his life work and carry the torch of revelation on the Great Pyramid beyond his death. A tremendous relief to a man who had spent his life attempting to tell the world what he knew. The fateful year of 1864 came, and the aged John Taylor died. His private notes and much of his research were willed by the family to Piazzi Smith, who with his wife then traveled to Egypt in the same year in a privately funded mission to the Great Pyramid in the hope of proving John Taylor correct. Smith took with him instruments by which he could make meticulous measurements throughout the structure, which resulted in the discovery of far more evidence of the divine purpose of the monument than even Taylor had imagined. Seeing the dimensions for himself, Smith was immediately persuaded in the biblical importance of this arcane relic standing in Egypt, and amazingly, his measurements reveal an architectural awareness of the size, dimensions, and density of the earth, its distance from the sun, equatorial diameter, and many other amazing facts. As Smith was busy in 1864 crawling through the interior of the structure, measuring almost every conceivable angle and distance in passages and in chambers, another Scotsman made a stunning revelation. His name was Robert Menzies, who had traced his own name to the earlier Hebrew Manasseh, and he had been inspired by Taylor's book and other writings on the Great Pyramid. Menzies wrote a letter to Piazzi Smith, and this letter was received in 1865 by Smith and his wife at the Great Pyramid site. Like John Taylor, Robert Menzies had never visited Egypt, his information and theories coming from research of others and by inspiration. Menzies explained to Smith that he believed the Great Pyramid's ascendant passage with its grand gallery was actually a linear calendar of the Christian history of the world from the crucifixion to the last days, every inch representing a single year. Smith was impressed with the idea, however, the concept was not taken seriously until something most unusual occurred. In Menzies' letter was provided detail-specific architectural facts about the interior dimensions of the structure that were only at that exact same time being discovered in Egypt by Piazzi Smith. Knowing that Menzies had never been to the pyramid site, Smith double-checked the measurements he had made and made a search through all the books published at the time and found absolutely no references at all existing in the written research of the monument by which Menzies could have obtained this data. Smith was confronted with a dimensional fact of the Great Pyramid ascertained by a man who by intuition provided this fact from thousands of miles away by simply believing that the monument was a measurement of the actual dates of historical events. Menzies was right, and Smith, on site, had just proven it by independent analysis. Smith now viewed the edifice in a totally new light and sought to show that the passage and chamber system had coded within their dimensions a calendar of the past, present, and future by isolating individual year dates in its planes, joints, angles, and passage lengths. After a thorough examination of the building, he discovered that the pyramid inch was precisely 1.001% of a British inch, and that the entire monument was measured out in all of its dimensions using this single standard of measurement. Smith even found ancient evidence of the existence of the pyramid inch in the fact that the Greek word for pyramid derived from the older Phoenician term for the structure literally meant light measures, the pyramid inch being a fraction of the speed of light, each inch also representing the orbital cycle of the Earth around the Sun, the principal source of all light in the solar system. Throughout his work, Smith's chief aim was to demonstrate that the Great Pyramid, though standing silently in Egypt, was never of or belonging to the civilization we refer to as Egypt. While Smith was preparing for the release of his extensive research, an American had something rather remarkable published in 1879. Charles Latimer, chief engineer of the railway at Cleveland, Ohio, wrote that the Great Pyramid was a pillar containing the weights and measures of the ancient world, and it was inspired by God, and that the Great Pyramid spoke in inches. The following year, Piazzi Smith's book was released in 1880, Our Inheritance in the Great Pyramid, an instant success depicting measurements throughout the structure as various timelines linking biblical and secular history. He dedicated the massive book to his friend John Taylor, and his final published work served to prove Robert Menzies correct as well. The work was a success, and pyramidology was virtually a new science with Piazzi as its priest. Though the calendrical variances between historical events changed little from Taylor's to Smith's work, their timelines relied too heavily on Usher's dating. Usher's fictitious chronology would later prove their undoing. Smith received a professorship at Edinburgh College, and the fact that such an eminent personage in the scientific community had released such inspiring and incredible claims actually offended many in the Royal Society. They searched for a champion to rebut these extraordinary claims and found one in the person of Sir William Flinders Petrie, a renowned archaeologist having traveled around the world studying the ruins of lost civilizations. Petrie was an intellectual prodigy whose archaeological survey methods first laid the basis for modern scientific archaeological exploration, and whose experience in previous geodetic and other survey work eminently fitted him for the task of surveying the Great Pyramid. The scientific world was giddy that so prestigious a scholar was going to survey Giza and the pyramids and forever put an end to this madness of pyramid inches, of divine architecture, and of prophecies encoded in stone. And that's when things turned real interesting. Petrie set out from England with the specific intent to disprove Taylor and Smith. He took with him the most advanced and sophisticated instruments in the world that enabled him to make calculations far superior to those made by Smith, and with which he is credited with making the most precise measurements of the exterior and interior of the monument ever made. Petrie produced measurements to the thousandths of an inch. At Giza, Sir Flinders Petrie studied the Great Pyramid with the fascination and skill of an archaeologist rather than an astronomer, and made many hitherto unknown discoveries about the ancient structure and published his findings in a monumental book, Pyramids and Temples of Giza, still the authoritative book on the Great Pyramid today, over 115 years later. His own studies persuaded him that the edifice encoded advanced astronomical and terrestrial information about Earth and its movement. The superior measurements of Petrie and the fact Smith had adopted historical dates attached to those measurements of his own, many derived directly from Usher's Chronology, allowed Petrie to launch a series of criticisms toward Piazzi Smith's own theory and work. To the delight of the Royal Society, Petrie critically damaged Smith's credibility, and pyramidology from then on was adopted through faith rather than fact. But the concept lived on and was taken very seriously again by the engineer David Davidson and H. Alder Smith. These men put together an even more exhaustive compilation of evidence supporting the idea that the pyramid inch theory and pyramid timeline was indeed very real and demonstrable. They totally abandoned Smith's measurements and adopted those of Sir Flinders Petrie, and their 1924 AD work was published as The Great Pyramid, Its Divine Message, a book filled with a tremendous amount of data with hundreds of charts and illustrations using Petrie's measurements in their own chronology, in which they elucidate and prove that the interior arrangements of the structure formed a geometrical calendar. But in the end, their own work lost its appeal after the initial public interest, and because the scientific community totally ignored the research, having already concluded the subject is fraudulent. The work received no criticism, which is so necessary for the popularity of a new theory. What further condemned their credibility was their use of an incomplete and inaccurate calendar by which to compare the most perfect measurements of Petrie. Because of an incomplete chronology as a frame of reference, they merely deduced the dates of historical events by the measurements they detected in the monument, as opposed to having already knew the exact dates and then seeing them verified in the measurements inside the Great Pyramid. This is a fundamental difference. The last gasp of the pyramid inch theory was the vast corpus of material in Adam Rutherford's 4-volume Pyramidology in 1942. But he was never taken seriously by Scientifica, for his writings were heavily scripture-based, Christian, and full of material already covered by previous pyramid researchers. He fell into disfavor for his focus on Britain and the United States being the absolute fulfillments of biblical prophecy. Further, Rutherford too used a totally wrong chronology, therefore could show no chronometrical correlates with the measurements of the Great Pyramid. He dated the Exodus at 1453 BC, this being 7 years off from the true date of 1447 BC, listed by so many sources. And this is absolutely relative. For any biblical chronologist to be accurate, they must first date the Exodus, because everything in the Bible after and before is chronologically linked to that event. Now, the pyramid inch and chronometrical concept does in fact exist. However, these researchers merely excavated information that they themselves interred. They were correct in the concept, but corrupt in their calculations due to the adoption of incorrect calendars. Without a perfect historical chronology of world history, chronometrical studies are fruitless. They often engender interest but not proof, which leads us to our present study. A perfect chronological timeline of the history of Earth has been achieved, demonstrated, and proven by multiple of ways as shown in my 510-page Chronicon, 7 published books, and over 50 of my videos dating historical events. We have done away with the fictitious Usher's chronology and have adopted the precise measurements of the Great Pyramid as discovered by the adept Sir Flinders Petrie. And for the first time in history, this amazing concept is crystallized and demonstrated in a collection of illustrations all employing Petrie's scientific measurements used in dating events and pyramid features. Here are 72 charts proving that Petrie's scientific measurements comport perfectly with the world history timeline as published in Chronicon. The pyramid inch theory is now demonstrated, and the intuition these early pioneers had is vindicated. Why is this important to us? Because everything in the Phoenix research and Anunna files is dated precisely, and these dates are shown in multiple rectilinear measurements in the Great Pyramid's measurements according to Sir Flinders Petrie. Hey guys, this is JasonArchaix.com. In this series, we're moving forward into an analysis of the Great Pyramid far more profound than anything that has yet been seen on this study. Our videos reveal that the Great Pyramid of Giza was called the Ikur, located in an area called Enoch, but at a site named Azag by a river. Inside the Ikur was the hidden Durga. The Sumerian belief was that this Durga was the chamber that protected the tablets of destinies. We show that these are references to Giza, the Nile, ancient area of Egypt called Anu and On near Giza, the king's chamber, and the plans with numbers hidden by Thoth. We have shown that it was an old faith among many peoples that the Great Pyramid contained the secrets of the past, the present, and the future. We have further shown in great detail that all the Phoenix phenomenon timelines and dates are encoded within the Great Pyramid's rectilinear dimensions. To comprehend the magnitude of how incredible are the facts we are going to reveal in this series, the Apex calendar, it will come easily for those who have already listened to our Giza Secrets Revealed playlist, Phoenix Phenomenon playlist, and Anunna Files playlist. This is because an understanding of what the Great Pyramid actually is requires a basic awareness of Giza studies, the Phoenix, and Anunnaki history. While the monument has an engineering function that we believe will not be fully understood until the return of the vapor canopy in May 2040, this series will show you overwhelming evidence that the spatial measurements of the structure mirror the linear time-space measurements of historical events in human history, and before they happened. The scientific measurements of the Great Pyramid made to the thousandth of an inch by Sir Flinders Petrie were done over 100 years ago. He died before I was born in 1973. My 510-page Chronicon, which is free in the Archaix Facebook files or on my website, Archaix.com, was written over a 16-year period before I had ever received the measurements of Sir Flinders Petrie. What you are about to see in this video and hear should shock you. By many species of computation, we have precisely dated the great flood of biblical infamy and secular history at May 2239 BC, a Phoenix cataclysm. U.S. cryptologists, chronographers, geographers, modern chronologists, and ancient rabbinical authors are all in agreement at this date. It is a data point that in numerous testimonies from historic texts reveal that the Great Flood occurred in the 1656 year of the Old World's calendar. We are told in these records that the Great Pyramid, the Axis Mundi, Mount Meru, Sumeru, the stone pillar of Enoch, the altar of agony of ancient Vedic texts, Mount Zion of the Bible, this Irminsul of the Germans and Yggdrasil of the Norse, Irem of the columns, built before the deluge to keep the times, a testimony of the past, present, and future. So we come to this fact. From the foundation of the monument straight vertically up to the foundation underside of the immense granite slab flooring of the king's chamber is 1656 inches. If this is a calendar, then its other measurements should bear this out. The Holy Writ mandates that by the witness of two or more is a thing established. This 1656 years of the antediluvian world ended when the vapor canopy collapsed in 2239 BC. A simple means of calculating the year of the flood is by the testimony of both Flavius Josephus and the Book of the Upright, called Jasher, both about 2,000 years old. Josephus wrote that Abram was born 292 years after the Great Flood, and Jasher, as well as Rashi over 800 years ago, both have Abram born in 1947 BC. A simple matter, 1947 plus 292 years is 2239 BC. Why is this important? If the Great Flood was in 2239 BC and this ended 1656 year timeline, then that pre-flood calendar began in 3895 BC. The exact year that chronologist Stephen Jones calculated was year 1 of the book of Genesis, and in the precise year that I independently found through my 138-year Phoenix visitation chronology was a devastating pole shift that created a new heavens and new earth and started timekeeping all over again in the year 3895 BC. Look at these attached images of Chronicon and these charts. So the Great Pyramid identifies this 1656 year period, and even further, it shows us today, using our own calendar, the proof of this. For the floor of the King's Chamber above the 1656 is 534 linear inches to the Great Step central axis of the entire structure, where sloping down through several courses of stone is a grand gallery floor and passage that ends exactly in 3,361 inches. So the 534-inch distance of the King's Chamber floor to the Great Step, and from the Great Step all the way down to the descending passage of the Grand Gallery, 3,361 inches, is a shocking 3,895 inches, mirroring in our own modern Anno Domini calendar the year 3,895 BC. This self-referencing and cross-calendrical system is fantastic. The entrance to the Great Pyramid is a vertical height of 666 inches from the monument's foundation, and 990 inches being the remaining distance to reach 1656 level with the foundation under the surface of the King's Chamber. As I show in Chronicon, the Great Pyramid's construction began at the foundation in 2905 BC, or 666 years before the Great Flood. It was built to survive. This year, 2905 BC, is the same as 990 Annus Mundi of the Old World's calendar. Giza construction began in the 534th year from the appearance of the Watchers, Homo Anunna, 534 inches being the King's Chamber measurement to the Great Step central axis of the Great Pyramid. And this, my friends, is only the beginning of what we are going to show you about this totally misunderstood holy monument. In this short presentation, we will see direct evidence from variant sources, scientific measurements, and correct chronology that the Great Pyramid chronographically identifies a start date of 3895 BC, a 1656 year period between cataclysms, the 138 year Phoenix periodicity, the oldest pyramid traditions concerning the Phoenix, the 3439 BC date of the appearance of the Watchers in the Anunna, Great Pyramid foundation date at 534th year of Anunna civilization, or 2905 BC, or the 990th year since 3895 BC Phoenix cataclysm that caused a new heavens and new earth. The Great Pyramid is a template of the future dates most important in human affairs, a holographic blueprint in stone of calendars and the architecture of the future itself. Look at this image, and you will see Sir Flinders Petrie's measurements of the internal Great Pyramid's dimensions. This is Chart A. Its measures. It shows the foundation up 990 inches to the ceiling of the Queen's Chamber, which is 666 more inches up to the 1656 mark of the Great Step face, the central axis of the entire pyramid. This is 1656 inches, 990 plus 666. Now, continuing upward another 340 inches, we get to the Grand Gallery ceiling, but sloping down the Grand Gallery ceiling's length of 1836 inches to the end, we then descend down 339 inches to the floor, to the Queen's Chamber floor passage entry, which is 1625 inches to the Queen's Chamber central axis, the axis where we started, which is on the floor 144 inches back up to the Queen's Chamber ceiling, where this entire measurement began. But these linear distances in inches now become years. Year 1 is at the foundation. Look at this chart. It's at the foundation of the Great Pyramid, going up to 2905 BC, which is 990 Annus Mundi. The ceiling level of the Queen's Chamber goes 666 inches higher to 2239 BC, which is 1656 Annus Mundi. Go up another 340 inches to 1899 BC, which is 1996 Annus Mundi. Go down the 1836 sloping distance inches of the ceiling of the Grand Gallery, and you get to 63 BC, which is 3832 Annus Mundi. Go down 339 inches at the end of the Grand Gallery to 277 AD, which is 4171 Annus Mundi. Go back all the way to where we started in the Queen's Chamber, but on the floor, 1625 inches, and we arrive at 1902 AD. And from 1902 AD, we go up 144 inches to 2046 AD, which completely closes our chronography. We ended exactly where we began. So now we look at this third chart. It is still chart A, but it's historical events. And we begin at 3895 BC, Phoenix Cataclysm, which is year 1, Annus Mundi, a new heavens, a new earth created by pole shift. It goes straight to the next date in our series, which is 2905 BC, the Great Pyramid construction begun. Continuing upward, we get to the Great Flood, 2239 BC, Phoenix Reset, known as the Great Deluge, central axis of the Great Pyramid. But we continue all the way upward, and we get to the top of the Grand Gallery, which is 1899 BC. It is the Tower of Babel. It's known as the Scattering Reset. It goes down 1836 inches or years all the way to 63 BC, where worldwide quakes were recorded throughout Asia Minor, and Greece. And Jerusalem falls to the Empire of Rome. And going down to the next date, we get to 277 AD, where Emperor Probus of Rome conquers the Goths. This is relative because the date before 63 BC was actually the isometric epicenter of the Book of Daniel's prophetic system. 63 BC was 540 years after the Babylon took Jerusalem. Now in 63 BC, Rome takes Jerusalem, but in 540 years after 63 BC, the Romans fall to the Goths in 476 AD. It's an isometric palindrome, and the palindrome is 540 plus 540, which is 1080 years. And if anybody who is paying attention, as you know in my Chronicon, the Great Pyramid was finished in 2815 BC, which is 1080 Annus Mundi. I even have a video just proving that the pyramid was built and finished in the year 1080. Now, following the chronometry, we now arrive at 1902. Phoenix deposits billions of tons of mud. 1902 AD is the hidden reset, and I have released 3, maybe 4 videos just about the year 1902 alone. So here our chronometry begins and almost ends with Phoenix resets, but we still have 144 inches to go, which 144 years from 1902 is the devastating return of Nemesis X object. Time is reduced by a third in the third trumpet of the revelation in the smack dab middle of the apocalypse, 2046 AD. And as Davidson found in 1926 by measuring the cross diagonals of the baselines of the Great Pyramid's 4 cornerstones, the Great Pyramid itself geometrically identifies the year 2045 as being the very last in Earth history's present orbital cycle. So we have here from 2 independent sources of data, Sir Flinders Petrie's scientific measurements done with a micrometer to a thousandth of an inch, and my own very meticulous chronicon, which was done, and I cite my source materials for all these dates. Dates are not even derived from me, and yet here we are, looking at the Great Pyramid as a holographic blueprint of future events that had not even yet happened. Prolific author E. Raymond Capp, over 50 years ago, wrote that if it could be shown that the Great Pyramid embodies a prophetic chronology, then we have evidence of the structure's divine origin. And another pyramid researcher, an American engineer who meticulously documented the antiquity of the inch measurement, who we will name in a future video, specifically wrote that the Great Pyramid speaks to us in inches. This was a statement made 100 years ago. So you decide, are the following rectilinear measurements a coincidence? Is it just chance that the Great Pyramid's measurements, if translated into units we know as years, happen to all end at 2040? My loyal listeners know May 16th, 2040 is the date for the next reset, the Ragnarok, the sixth seal of the apocalypse, the return of Mother Shipton's Sky Dragon, the black sun of ancient American traditions. It is the encoded date for the cataclysm by Nostradamus, the return of the Phoenix phenomenon. 2040 is the return of the vapor canopy world. So you decide, you make a decision if what I'm sharing in this video is a series of unrelated coincidences. Remember, these measurements are scientifically accepted, done by Sir Flinders Petrie himself, accepted by Egyptologists, widely published. And these dates all come from multiple sources in my published books and Chronicon, written years before I was given these measurements. Exhibit A. The great triangular number called the Technolithic represents the number 10 and is shaped like a pyramid. This has been known for centuries. The Great Pyramid is 203 levels of stone, missing a top stone, which is the 204th level. This 204 courses of rock times 10 is 2040. Exhibit B. This is confirmed in the fact that when the top stone is added, the Great Pyramid will be 5,814 inches high, which has been known for 200 years. The height of 5814 is a vertical length added to the horizontal floor length of the King's Chamber from the Great Step central axis, being 534 inches. This 5,814 plus 534 inches is exactly 6,348 inches, or the exact amount of years from the beginning of the Phoenix chronology in 4309 BC to the year 2040. To better appreciate how meticulous this research is, I advise you to look at the charts on Archaix.com. Or if you want them in your hand, you can order them for free. I've made them as cheap as possible with shipping and handling. Now Exhibit C. A third confirmation of this calendar message is found in the fact that the four sloping sides of the Great Pyramid are at 51 degrees each. 51 times 4 is 204, and abbreviated by the Tetrakis, 2040. Exhibit 4. Not only the King's Chamber, but the Grand Gallery too conveys this calendrical message. The floor of the King's Chamber is 1,700 inches above the foundation of the pyramid, and 340 more inches vertically up is the ceiling of the Grand Gallery. 1,700 plus 340 is exactly 2040. Now, for those of you who would notice that 2040 is a reference to the Anno Domini system, you must realize my whole entire channel is a simulation theory channel. I reveal through the Antiquity, the mysteries of Antiquity, and our physics constants that we're living within a controlled simulation. This is why the Great Pyramid holography and chronometry work in tandem to produce these dates. It was known from the beginning that the calendars would change. Even the calendar Anno Domini didn't begin in 1 AD, it began in 526 by Sosigenes, and it wasn't even brought into practical use for another 200 to 275 years. But it doesn't matter. In retrospect, the simulacrum has absorbed all this data, and whoever constructed the Great Pyramid knew the holographic template of the future and encoded every bit of it.
Exhibit 5. The ceiling of the Grand Gallery is 1,836 inches long. The width of the King's Chamber is 204 inches. Well, 1836 plus 204 is 2040. Exhibit 6. The entrance to the Great Pyramid is 666 inches above the pyramid foundation at a sloping distance of 808 inches from the perimeter of the monument. This entrance is also a sloping distance of 1,110 inches up from the axis passage conjunct, which itself is 176 inches above the pyramid's foundation. From the perimeter where this measurement began to the axis conjunct where it ended is a horizontal length of 1,518 inches. So from beginning to end, this measurement is 4,278 inches, both starting and ending at the pyramid's foundation, which is 1,656 inches below the King's Chamber Great Step Slab. 4,278 plus 1656 is 5934, which in our Anno Domini calendar is the year 2040. Exhibit 7. We now measure back downward this same 1656 inches from the Great Step Slab to the foundation, which is 1,070 inches to the subterranean chamber ceiling, this area being 1,414 inches long. 1656 was the year 2239 BC, the Great Phoenix Deluge, the flood in the Bible and many other traditions. In 1656 plus 1070 plus 1414 is 5796. The year 5796 Annus Mundi is our year of 1902 AD. I have 3 videos on 1902 and what happened, and 1902 begins the final 138 years to the return of the Phoenix in 2040. Our measurement began with 1656 inches as years, and here 1656 becomes months, for 1902 is 1656 months to 2040. 1,656 months being precisely 138 years. This calculation can just as easily begin at the pyramid foundation and go up 1656 and come back down 1656 inches to reach the same date. Further, going backward up the descending passage in reverse to the axis passage conjunct is 3,036 pyramid inches, giving us a date backward in time from 1902 to the devastating year of 1135 BC, a major Phoenix reset cataclysm described in Chronicon and of my other published books and in my videos. Exhibit 8. The Olmec calendar began in 3373 BC, from which the Mayan calendar derived. 204 plus 204 inches is 408. This is the width of both the King's and the Queen's chambers. 3373 BC minus 408 years is the year 2965 BC. The exact year, 930 Annus Mundi, or the year according to the biblical record in the Jasher text and the Jewish Haggadah records, it's the year that Adam died. And in Hebraic chronology, this is the year the sun mysteriously darkened, which is a major element of both Olmec and Maya prophecy. The Great Step is a giant limestone block 126 inches long, and 126 years after 2965 BC was the year 2839 BC, the year Noah was born during the first regnal year of the Anunnaki dynasty, for which I have 3 videos about just this year in my Anunna files videos on YouTube. The Great Step face ends this 126-year length and descends 3,360 inches down the Grand Gallery to the passage axis conjunct to 4416, or our year 522 Anno Domini, the only year in world history when both the Phoenix and the Nemesis X object, commonly known as Nibiru by many, were seen in the same year. The axis conjunct is 1,518 inches to the pyramid's perimeter, and 1,518 years after 522 AD, when both of these objects appeared in the sky at the same time, is the year 2040. Exhibit 9. This 2965 BC start date, or Adam's death and the sun darkening, is confirmed again, starting at the pyramid entry 1,110 inches to the passage axis conjunct to arrive at 1855 BC, the year Nemesis X object appeared for the first time after the deluge, as found in Chronicon. This is 3,360 inches up the ascendant passage to the Great Step central axis, and the 534 inches of the King's Chamber floor from the Great Step face is 2040, or 5934 Annus Mundi. Exhibit 10. 2909 BC was Enoch's final year among men before he disappeared into the sky. In this year, he passed on divine instructions to his people, which contained the blueprints for the Great Pyramid complex. Enoch prophesied against the inhabitants of the deep. Starting at pyramid perimeter and moving 808 inches to the entrance is 2101 BC, the first time Phoenix on its 138-year timeline appeared after the deluge. Now, descending the full 4,146 inches, or 345.5 feet down to the subterranean chamber floor joint, brings us to exactly 5934 inches, which is 5934 Annus Mundi, or 2040 AD. Exhibit 11. Solomon's temple was dedicated in the year 957 BC. This is not dated by me, but biblical chronologists such as Stephen Jones. Dropping the 340 inches from the Grand Gallery ceiling to the floor gives us 617 BC, or the year Babylon under Nabopolassar begins its dominance over the Near East, which was 3278 Annus Mundi. Now descending the 1546 inches from the gallery to the end of the passage brings us to the year 930 AD, or 4824 Annus Mundi, when the descendants of Babylonia sack Mecca and take the holy relics from the Muslim Kaaba. This axis conjunct is 1,110 inches to the pyramid entrance. 930 AD plus 1,110 years is 2040 AD. My friends, I have much more to show you. The Great Pyramid is a holographic calendar of the future. Many more of these videos are on the way. This data in this video about 2040 is added to, not derived from, the 30 or so Phoenix videos I already possess, and Great Pyramid videos, 3 published books, and then numerous posts on Facebook. I'm building Archaix, and you can help by donating in the links below. There are also Phoenix, Great Pyramid, and World Chronology chart packs with posters. You might want to look into this. Many people have been sending me emails telling me how much it helps them to be able to look at the physical copies in their hands while they listen to my videos to understand these aren't just dates I'm throwing out. They're very well documented, established, and substantiated with multiple source materials. In May 2040, my friends, everything changes. You need to make sure that you have what you need. Davidson in the year 1927 published research that the unit of measurement employed in the building of the Great Pyramid of Egypt that has long baffled scholars and archaeologists were units based off divisions of our solar year. Davidson claims that this unit of measurement was the scale by which all measurements in the monument were taken, and he stated that, quote, any other architect or engineer, not having seen the original plans and not knowing what system of measurement was adopted in the construction, can find from the structural dimensions of the building itself what scale of measurement had been adopted. This is a profound statement. This denotes perfection. Now, Herodotus, Pliny, and Agatharchides of the ancient world, and then Sir Isaac Newton, and as you know, I said in my other videos, John Taylor, and Smith, Rutherford, Menzies, Raymond Capt. There's more than that, but we all believe that the Great Pyramid's dimensions were very important, as well as many other historic and modern researchers that are living today. Nobel Prize-winning Maurice Maeterlinck in the year 1922 wrote concerning the mathematics incorporated into the Great Pyramid. He said that these were very strange indeed. Quote, But the strangest, most disconcerting fact is that none of the innumerable hieroglyphs that have been deciphered, nothing indeed to be found in the whole literature of ancient Egypt, makes any allusion at all to this extraordinary knowledge. And nor could it have been. For until the year 820 AD, the monument had been sealed until the Muslims dynamited their way into it. And up until the year 1356 AD, the casing blocks protected the inner core bricks from the prying eyes of discovery. In 1879, Charles Latimer, the chief engineer of the railway in Cleveland, Ohio, wrote that the Great Pyramid was a pillar containing the weights and measurements of the ancient world, that the monument was inspired by God, that the United States was an inheritor of the secrets of the monument as depicted by its Great Seal, which has an image of the Great Pyramid. Mr. Latimer wrote, quote, "When a man or nation adopts a seal, it is understood that the most significant of all emblems for them is placed thereon. We look to the seal to give us the clue to the origin or genealogy of the wearer or owner. What other nation has such a seal? Will the Great Pyramid speak to those whose measures are not there? For I assure you, the Great Pyramid speaks in inches." The 600th year of the Anunnaki chronology was 4639 BC, when the Nemesis cataclysm occurred. Our binary solar system simulation suddenly changed to a day star, the sun, with a hidden dark star that caused all the anomalies astronomers have detected in the planetary relationships. The well pit access inside the Great Pyramid symbolizes the deep, the great abyss, and it marks the 330th inch from the wall of the king's chamber. This 330 years is how long it took the Phoenix object to arrive in its present 138-year periodicity from the distant Nemesis binary that it broke free of. 4309 BC begins the Phoenix timeline of 138-year periods to 2040 AD, so we are not surprised to find it right here in the chronometry of the Great Pyramid of Egypt. This 330th inch is 1,700 vertical inches straight down the well pit access to the foundation of the pyramid, we arriving at 2609 BC. In this year, King Enlil-galana ascended the throne of the Anunnaki dynasty at Bad Tabira before the flood. The interior of the Great Pyramid was examined in this year, and it is possible that material or mechanisms were removed in this year from the Grand Gallery and Antechamber. Though I have a lot of problems with Zecharia Sitchin, I do agree with him that in this year, in the first regnal year of this king at Bad Tabira, the Great Pyramid had been explored, penetrated, and materials were removed. The foundation level is yet another 1,162 inches down into the well pit in the subterranean chamber, getting us to the year 1447 BC, the 10 plagues of Egypt and the Exodus. Now, the subterranean chamber length is 1,414 inches, leading upward 4,146 inches to the entrance of the pyramid, which is itself 524 inches from the perimeter of the pyramid, for a total distance of 6,084 inches. The 6,084th year of the Phoenix timeline was 1776 AD. The beginning of the Phoenix chronology at 4309 BC was the 330th year since Nemesis collapsed, its parent star. In 1776 AD, likewise begins a 330-year countdown to the year 2106 AD, the year of the return of the chief cornerstone. 2106 AD is the 6,000th year since Phoenix caused a new heavens and new earth in a destructive pole shift that occurred in the year 3895 BC, year one of the pre-flood world and vapor canopy. 1776 AD began the United States, the empire of adoption, born of Egypt in its ancestry, its first great seal being the phoenix, which was quietly changed to the eagle in the year 1902. and the Great Pyramid, 1902 being the last time the Phoenix had visited. See my three videos on the hidden Phoenix reset of 1902. Both 3895 BC and 1776 AD are found in an entirely separate order of chronometry as well. The 1,110-inch passage entry begins 666 inches high, or for a total of 1776 inches. The Grand Gallery and Ascendant Passage is both 3,360 and 3,361 inches due to an uneven floor terminus that was intended by the architects. This 3,360 inches leads us to 534-inch long Great Step floor into the King's Chamber. So 3,361 plus the 534 inches of the King's Chamber to the Great Step face is 3895, or the year 1 of the ancient world's 6,000-year calendar. This makes 1 AD to be at the beginning of the 1,110-inch long passage that leads up to 1776 AD. Again, Phoenix chronology in the United States are inextricable. In my books and videos, I show that in May 2040, the USA will be geographically altered. New York City will sink underwater. The land south of the 30-degree latitudinal parallel will slip under the surface of the Gulf of Mexico. But this does not mean its people will perish. The 1776 date in Phoenix holography in this chronometrical arrangement hints of an exodus. The empire of adoption will live on. The people of the United States, Canada, Mexico, and even the United Kingdom, all having ancient blood ties, will flood the old world, bringing their genetics back to the lands of their nativity. The people of modern times, to escape the coming cataclysm, will go back and live among the perimeters of the ancient world, to those original civilizations that had survived. For those of you who think you know what that Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau truly is, I'm going to change your mind with this video. This is the closest approximation to a scientific method of analyzing the Great Pyramid that has ever been conducted. You will understand when you see. Many people can isolate particulars about the Great Pyramid because it has all the fundamentals of physics encoded within it. It's easy to find patterns. That's what we are. We are creatures of pattern recognition. What I'm going to show you defies patterns. What I'm about to show you in this video right here requires a much deeper analysis than I am able to give it. It's so profound that I'm humbled sometimes in just trying to really decipher what it is I have found. I'm really seeking people with greater minds than I who can put these pieces together. But this is a really fascinating presentation. Please stick with it till the end. 14 years ago, when my publisher released my first book, The Lost Scriptures of Giza, I had no idea the rabbit hole I was going to go down researching the Great Pyramid of Egypt. Little did I know that it was going to take me deeper and deeper into the depths of world chronology, which led to researching books most people have never heard of. When the Sun Darkens was published in 2009 by the same publisher. This book is the beginning of my Phoenix research. Before that book could get published, I had uncovered so much data I had to put out a second book about the Phoenix chronology. And I did. Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse. This book, too, required a lot of searching down different rabbit holes, really, and I uncovered so much more information. I began to tie in all the loose ends on the flat earth, on the mud flood research, on world chronology, on simulation theory. It all began to a coherent synthesis, and all these different mysteries began to take form. My next book, Shocking Secrets of Antiquity, is huge. 422 bibliographic sources. Many of you have seen Matthew Devereaux's posts in on the Facebook group. You're familiar with some of that material. These 4 books only show a world chronology of 138-year intervals. I did not know what I'm about to show you now in this video when I wrote those books. But those dates are not dated by me, they're dated by other authors, and I provide those source materials in my bibliographic references. Enjoy this video. This is JasonArchaix.com. I'm going to change your mind of what you think that Great Pyramid is. The mystery of history is coding. This thesis completely shatters every theory of the Great Pyramid ever told, ever sold, or said. When you fully understand the implications of this video, you will agree. A series of numbers representing years and disasters appears in records from antiquity that defy ordinary explanation. They reappear in recorded historical texts over and over again. Then, in a third and most astonishing place, these same numbers appear all together in a synthesis so profound that their arrangement forms a holographic blueprint in multiple dimensions. All 3 are found in this item. This chronology is shown in our posts, articles, videos, and published books to isolate May 2040 as the next visitation of the Phoenix phenomenon. Not an intruder world. It's worse. Part 1. Phoenix periods cited. Censorinus in the 3rd century AD wrote that Aristarchus of Samos reckoned a great year as 2,484 years, which is 138 times 18. This 2484-year period was the time between 2 cataclysms, according to Aristarchus. This Ionian mathematician and astronomer studied at the hallowed halls of the Alexandrian library, and he had access to materials that we no longer possess. 2484 years betrays a knowledge of a definite chronology that existed in his time, further evidenced by the fact that 2 centuries prior to him, Thales of Miletus, another Ionian scholar, accurately predicted the phoenix blackening of the sun in the month of May 583 BC. 2484 years added to 2484 years is 4,968 years. Dr. Barry Wormkessel concludes, after reviewing historic records and modern scientific reports, that Vulcan, which to him is a distant Jovian-sized planet that's a member of our solar system, this distant Jovian-sized dark star companion of our sun is on a highly inclined 4968-year orbit. Vulcan attracts comets from the Kuiper belt, Kuiper, I'm not sure, and has formed multiple, at least 5 comet swarms that pass through the inner solar system. These comet fragments hit Earth at quasi-periodic time intervals, 3,313, give or take 200 years is his estimate, which is really interesting because 3,312 is divisible by 138. It's 138 times 24. His Vulcan is none other than the Phoenix. I have personally exchanged correspondence with Dr. Wormkessel and my data that the Phoenix is indeed the Vulcan that he has discovered. Around 1902, the historian Hans Bellamy published a series of books concerning the capture flood, the sudden appearance of our moon in the skies in a world that had never seen the lunar orb before. A cataclysm had occurred, widespread flooding. Bellamy published that an analysis of Maya reliefs and tradition held that this destruction from the sky was connected to an event that was measured at 2,760 years. This is 138 times 20. Also in ancient America, we have the Inca remembering a catastrophe that began their own history. In 1624, historian Montesinos wrote that the Inca recalled a beginning period of 2,070 years, which is 138 times 15. This is too arbitrary of a duration. If not derived from a precise historical chronology, then they would have just said 2,000 years. In 1658, Archbishop James Usher published his famous World Chronology.
It is found in many Bibles. He had access to historical records that have since been lost or hidden in the past 362 years. This chronographer describes an unknown astronomical body appearing in the skies, causing the Ogygian flood in the Old World calendar year of the year 2208 Annus Mundi. 2208 is 138 times 16. This was 1687 BC in our own modern day Gregorian calendar, and it is the subject of many videos in Archaix. The Archbishop's source materials were different over 340 years before. Stephen Jones concluded also that the sun darkened during a major worldwide series of quakes in the year 2208 of the Book of Jasher Chronology and the Assyrian eponyms. Jones published his findings in the 1990s in his book, The Secrets of Time, and he does not mention once that his materials derived from Archbishop James Usher. Strangely, Bishop Usher died in 1656 Common Era, and according to the Genesis 10 Patriarchs chronology, it is the conclusion of over 40 ancient writers that the Old World civilizations ended in a great flood in the 1656 year, which is 138 times 12. This is curious, for an ancient Egyptian ceremony concerning a flood concerns a 1656 month period, and 1656 months is exactly 138 years. Over 900 years ago, the Talmudic researcher Rashi, around 1090 CE, wrote that the Great Flood occurred in the 1656 year, and that 1656 years was a definite period of time that occurred between cataclysms. Half of 2484 is 1242. And the French Jewish prophet Nostradamus wrote in a private letter that 1242 years, which is 138 times 9, was the period before the flood from Adam to Noah. Stephen Jones published charts in a book demonstrating that over 60 historical events were all transpired on timelines that were 414 years apart from each other. Again, this is interesting, for 414 is 138 times 3. Stephen Jones knew nothing about the Phoenix research because the Archaix research and Phoenix research by myself was not conducted until years later. The Egyptian 1656 moons that designate a 138-year period is paralleled in the old Jewish tradition of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and the appearance of the angel of death every 138 years. This is a Jewish tradition. The angel of death. Phoenix, anciently depicted with burning wings like a seraphim angel in Scripture. Every duration listed is a Phoenix number divisible by 138. 2484, 4968, 3312, 2760, 2208, 1656, 1242, 414, 138. To put this list together after the destruction of so many texts, libraries, and traditions is remarkable in itself. Now, part 2. Phoenix dates in history. The following dates are all those dated in other records and sources when Phoenix appeared and caused worldwide or localized continental quakes, blackening of the sun, moon turning red, meteoric fallout, volcanism, lithospheric displacements, mud floods, and a harrowing vibration so terrific people, communities, and structures simply sank into the earth and remained trapped underground when the vibrating stopped, returning the ground to a hard solid. Buried alive. These years where this occurred was 4307 BC, 3895 BC, which begins the Genesis narrative of the pre-flood world, 2653 BC, 2239 BC, the Great Flood so popularized in Antiquity, 1963 BC, 1687 BC, the collapse of the Heliolythic empires, 1549 BC, 1411 BC, 1273 BC, 1135 BC, 721 BC, 583 BC, 307 BC, 246 Common Era, 384 Common Era, 522 Common Era. Then there's a 1,104-year period where there's no records, but many legends of destroyed civilizations throughout the ancient Americas. Phoenix returns in 1626. Again, it is seen by astronomer Hoffman and over 1 million Europeans in 1764. And then in 1902, it visited our world. And history books have been scrubbed, but Archaix has put the picture back together by original source materials that have seemed to have been Mandelaed in some way. The Mandela effect being orchestrated or manufactured. These records are being scrubbed. 1902 was a harrowing year in world chronology. The next visitation, of course, is May 2040. Every date is on the 138-year Phoenix timeline. Our videos and book bibliographies provide all the source materials for the data. There are more records, but not definitively dated. And we have more yet probably undiscovered in our thousands of pages of notes we have not yet been able to go through. It's we have a lot. We have a lot on our plate. We're trying to get it all out as best as we can. This thesis does not deal with approximates. That we have so many records is astonishing unto itself. Now, part 3, the Phoenix Holofield Mysterium. The book Lost Scriptures of Giza is a work unlike any other on the origin and purpose of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Over 1,000 facts gleaned from hundreds of ancient and old source materials. This book concludes that the Great Pyramid is the original structure and all other pyramids were attempts to copy it. It was designed to survive a cataclysm to preserve knowledge that only at an end-time generation would be able to perceive. It was built during a 1656-year pre-cataclysm period. It protects a secret important to saving humanity. The elect will rediscover what this important knowledge is. For those wanting to read this book, in the comments section, I'll provide a link to the Amazon. You can get it real cheap, just Amazon Kindle, or you can order the paperback. What you are about to read, what you are about to hear right now defies coincidence. It has never been published. There are over 1,000 books on the Great Pyramid and many more YouTube videos, but nothing you are about to review in this video is found in any of them. You are about to learn the principal message of this most enigmatic monument. No pharaoh, no known historical civilization, no ordinary architecture could have encoded this material in this gigantic structure. Only the most advanced scientific measurements ever conducted in and outside of the Great Pyramid could even produce these revelations. Flinders Petrie used instruments accurate to 1,000th of an inch, and his measurements are today accepted by Egyptologists. No other building in the world is so precise, a self-referencing holographic model of our space-time coding. The Great Pyramid is enormous, a 41-story high structure. It is 203 levels of blocks, some courses higher than others. The beginning of the 144th level is 4140 inches above the pyramid foundation. 144 is the great number of the golden mean. The Fibonacci series. It is 12 times 12. It is the cycle within a cycle. And that level of blocks marks the 4,140th inch above the pyramid foundation. 4140 is 138 times 30. This exterior height is replicated in the internal descending passage mean length. The east terminus length is 4134 inches. The west terminus is 4146 inches. The central mean distance is 4140 inches of passage length from pyramid entrance to subterranean passage floor joint. The subject of the pyramid inch is very controversial, but it's controversial for means that are outside the context of this video and this research. People have tried to prove that there was a historical timeline in the Great Pyramid in the past, and we have other videos and posts concerning this topic, so we're not going to waste that time here. But the prime unit of measurement to build the entire Great Pyramid derives from the ancient megalithic yard, which is seen in ancient monuments all around the planet, principally in the UK. Now, that unit of measurement we call the pyramid inch, because it was used everywhere throughout the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid references itself multiple times and in multiple dimensions, every unit of measurement that was employed to build it. The vertical distance from bottom of floor slab, called the Great Step central axis of the monument, or floor of the king's chamber, straight down to the ceiling of the subterranean chamber, is 2,726 inches, and the horizontal length of the subterranean passage itself is 1414 inches. Together, they add up to 4140 inches, 138 times 30. This is self-referencing. The Great Step is a peculiar 126-inch long block of limestone. The rest of the floor of the king's chamber is granite. The king's chamber from floor to ceiling is 230 inches. This 126 times 230 is 28,980, or 4140 times 7, again, divisible by 138. The height of the subterranean chamber at 11 feet 6 inches high is 138 inches. At this 138-inch height roof in the underground chamber, we find a ceiling that is 552 inches in width, or 138 times 4. While this 552-inch distance is below the pyramid, above the pyramid, 552 is geometrically inferred. The present height of the Great Pyramid is 5,448 inches. This is 203 courses of blocks. This is 552 inches under 6,000 inches, meaning the flat-topped 203rd level is 552 inches under 6,000 inches. As above, so below. When a cornerstone is put on top of the Great Pyramid, it will be 552 inches high, 138 times 4. The central subterranean pit access to the end of the subterranean passage is a horizontal distance of 908 inches, and the subterranean passage floor surface is a vertical distance of 1162 inches below the pyramid's baseline. The subterranean horizontal and vertical distance is 2070 inches, 908 plus 1162. 2070 is 138 times 15. The 552-inch width of the subterranean chamber is 1,070 inches below the pyramid's baseline. The length of the entire subterranean passage level is 1414 inches. This vertical subterranean distance and horizontal underground distance add up to 2484. 1070 plus 1414. 2484 is 138 times 18. Now, adding the 552 ceiling width to 2484, it's 3,036 inches. Again, divisible by 138. But more importantly, it is a common measurement throughout the pyramid. This 3,036 inches is the exact length of the descending passage from the passage axis conjunct to the descending passage floor joint. 3,036 inches is 138 times 24, or 253 feet. That is a very long distance to go through scores of courses of block with granite casing on the inside of the tunnels to be laser perfect, smooth, and precise. Many people think the Great Pyramid is just piles of blocks on top of it. It's not. The exterior looks that way because the Muslims stripped away the white limestone casing blocks to build the city of Cairo after an earthquake in the 13th century AD. The actual interior, this system of unusual chambers and passages, they are laser precise. The tolerances exceed what we produce on bank sidings today in marble. Let's see. The entrance of the Grand Gallery is 1,200 inches above the baseline foundation of the Great Pyramid. The ceiling of the Grand Gallery is 1,836 inches distance, and added to the gallery floor height of 1,200 inches is 3,036. Again, we find that number. The pyramid is self-referencing. Half of 3,036 is 1,518, 138 times 12. The passage axis conjunct is 3,036 inches down the subterranean passage from the conjunct to the floor joint. And measuring the opposite direction from the passage axis conjunct to the pyramid perimeter is 1,518 inches. The actual height of the Great Pyramid is 5,448 present inches, but The 51.51 degree sloping angles of the monument reveal that the top cornerstone would be 3,066 inches high for a total monument height of 5,814 inches. Not my discovery, 5,814 geometrical height known since the 1920s. This 1514 finished height is a vertical distance of 4968 inches above the Queen's Chamber floor, which is 846 inches above the pyramid's baseline. 4968 is 138 times 36, and 2484, which is 2484 plus 2484. The bottom of the foundation slab of the Great Pyramid that serves as the floor of the King's Chamber is 1656 inches above the pyramid's baseline. 1656 is 138 times 12. The Great Pyramid has 4 sockets at its 4 corners. The length and width of the northwest and northeast sockets are 138 inches. The Phoenix numbers appear here in multiple dimensions. The passage axis conjunct is 176 inches above the pyramid baseline, and 176 times pi, 3.14, is 552. Again, that's 138 times 4. The King's Chamber is 230 inches high. The Queen's Chamber is 144 inches high. The subterranean chamber is 138 inches high. 230 plus 144 plus 138 is 512. 512 times phi, the golden proportion of 1.618, is 828, or 138 times 6. Phi is golden proportion. It is 1.618, and it appears everywhere in nature. It is the primary substrate coating for the holosphere. The simulacrum operates off a coating run by 1.618, 3.1416, and 5.08. The 3 chamber heights are all commensurate with 138, which is the holosphere simulacrum's resonance. 138 is profound. It is the principal message of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. The King's Chamber, on the floor, the distance is 534 inches to the great step central axis of the pyramid. This is the central axis of the entire monument. This King's Chamber is 412 inches long, 204 inches wide, and 230 inches high. 534 plus 412 plus 204 plus 230 is 1,380, which is 138 times 10. Note, the King's Chamber, it had explosive pressure, which added an inch according to modern published research. But these dimensions are pre-explosion measurements. 534-inch horizontal length of the great step slab of the King's Chamber and the 846th vertical length of the Queen's Chamber floor to the pyramid baseline adds up to 1380, 138 times 10. In 1926, the engineer Davidson published that it was his calculation that the Great Pyramid's internal rectilinear timeline isolated a certain year important to pyramid chronology at the passage axis conjunct. Not knowing anything of the Phoenix timeline, the Phoenix research of resets and mud floods, cataclysm, Davidson published that this year was 2484 Anno Pyramid. Again, 2484 is divisible by 138. Central axis great step face is 34 inches high to the King's Chamber floor surface, and the great step floor joint with the grand gallery is 1656 inches above the baseline of the monument. This is 1,690 inches down to the baseline, which is 1,070 inches above the subterranean ceiling, for a total of 2,760 inches, 138 times 20. The perimeter of the Great Pyramid sloping distance upward to the entrance is 808 inches, this entrance being 666 inches above the pyramid baseline. The entrance to the passage axis conjunct is 1,110 inches, which itself is 176 inches above the baseline of the monument. 808 plus 1,110 plus 666 plus 176 is 2,760. Again, 138 times 20. The great step central axis of the Great Pyramid to the perimeter of the monument is 4,554 inches, which is 138 times 33. Davidson measured the exterior of the Great Pyramid and determined that its four sides are at 51.51 degrees from the base perimeter to apex, but it's been conclusively shown in measurements and photographs that the pyramid actually has 8 sides, each face having 2 planes only slightly angled. Thus, 51.51 times 8 is 414, 138 times 3. A holographic blueprint of our space-time structure. Our holofield is coded to revolve at 365.25 days a year, a figure found encoded in the Great Pyramid many times over and mentioned in several books. What these facts and measurements mean is that the physical dimensions of the Great Pyramid are connected to the 138-year Phoenix phenomena visitations that the message of its builders concerned themselves with, building a gigantic structure that would preserve these patterns for future posterity. What this also means is that every tradition, article, book, YouTube video, theory, or idea about the function of the Great Pyramid and its purpose and the purpose of the Great Pyramid in Egypt is false, if not incorporating into their model this 138-year unit spatial and calendrical data. Now, you decide what all this means. Did they build a monument that created an interface pattern in reality and caused the Phoenix destructions? Or are the traditions true? Is Giza a relic of our salvation? Do we reactivate it to stop this phenomenon? If you perceive a third alternative, please offer it. We have many videos on the true history and facts about the Great Pyramid. Please check them out in the comment section.
So in the end, we're left with a super construction, not one of modern provenance, but one from distant antiquity that was erected so long ago that it's not mentioned in any ancient written records as what it is, the Great Pyramid and its function. Instead, we have it mentioned thousands of times in metaphor, in allegory, and secondhand sources, in tradition, not knowing exactly what they were preserving. This is what my first book, Lost Scriptures of Giza, reveals. Hundreds of traditions from around the world that when put together, you realize they're talking about the Great Pyramid of Egypt or a knowledge of such a place. Now, we have 2 different bodies of information that have been coalesced in this video. We have a very well documented Phoenix history of 138-year intervals, and yet we have also those same 138-year intervals all found in multiple dimensions of the Great Pyramid's rectilinear measurements, using the most scientific measurements ever conducted in the Great Pyramid, which are still accepted by Egyptologists today. The main point of this video is to convey, if you have a theory about the Great Pyramid, if you think you know what the Great Pyramid, if you're publishing books and videos, if you're giving lectures and seminars, if you're Graham Hancock or anybody like him, and you think you know what the Great Pyramid is, that's all good. Everybody's entitled to a theory, a hypothesis. But if you do not incorporate this 138 interval holographic blueprint into your theory, then you're wrong. Because it's the principal message of the Great Pyramid itself. Where I'm at now is, was the pyramid constructed to interface with this 138-year protocol and disrupt it to stop the resets? Is the chief cornerstone the savior of humanity who's going to descend from heaven upon the monument of man and do this for us? Or can we do it ourselves? That's where I'm at. Maybe you can see something that I can't.